Joining me now, David Gazzard, DPG Advisory Director, former Liberal advisor, and Ben Oquist, Executive Director at the Australia Institute, former Greens advisor. Ben, first to you, this question about the Religious Discrimination Bill. It's a complex area, no doubt, but it seems for both sides it's been a difficult one to navigate and yet to land, really, when it's the Parliament still sits, albeit only for a few more days, Ben.
Yeah, well, I note that Trent Zimmerman and David Sharma have both reserved the right to cross the floor. So it's unclear how this legislation is going to play out in the Parliament. Can't do better than to quote both Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins, who said different things when I was watching them there at the press club. I was there not long ago. And Grace Tame said, well, she doesn't understand why one group of people is allowed to be themselves and not another when referring to the potential carve-out for transgender rights and discrimination there, while gay and lesbian students are protected. And Brittany Higgins, who said, look, just really treat this issue sensitively, because we're talking about people's lives, we're talking about people's identities. I haven't seen quite enough of that yet. And the very fact that this is being rushed, squeezed so late in the term underscores that it's not being managed that way. I really hope that we get legislation that protects all students, not just some of them.
David Gazzard, if we needed a reminder of just how sensitive and how much is at stake, I think one of the more powerful speeches that I've seen in the House of Representatives by Stephen Jones yesterday, reflecting on the tragedy around his family and the loss of his nephew. It was a poignant contribution.
Absolutely, and this has consequences that reach into, schools, churches, the workplace. But Australia is based on a number of fundamental freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of association, the rule of law, and the freedom of religion. And this bill, which has not been rushed, has not been squeezed, this is the second time that it's gone to the party room, and it's having the kinks knocked out of it. It's a tribute to the party room that all members are having their say. There's a process that's been afoot for some time now, for some weeks, to make sure it's knocked into shape, that everyone's concerns are met. So it was an election commitment 3 years ago, and this is the final weeks of the Parliament for this bill to go through. So it's natural that you would be seeking to honour your commitment to the public at the last election, and all members went to the election with this as part of their platform. They would be seeking to have a broader remit that goes to keeping faith with faith groups right across their seats. Faith groups of all sizes, descriptions, ethnic backgrounds and makeups. So while there are going to be points of friction wherever you seek to codify any bill, the strength of this is that it seeks to enshrine one of the great freedoms that Australia has always enjoyed.
Yeah, well, Ben, you would recognise that as well, that this is something that Labor raised after the last election, that they didn't get the balance right or the recognition strong enough of those of faith, and it hurt them in a number of electorates around the country.
Oh, sure, Kieran. Absolutely, Labor heard a message that they weren't sensitive enough to people's faiths, but if that's what this bill is about, just kind of sending a message out that we support people of faith rather than actual needed legislation, then we're in a mess. And it is clearly a solution in search of a problem. There hasn't been a great outcry of the need for this legislation. In fact, there's been a great outcry of the dangers of this legislation, and they're going to put one new set of rights trample over the top of other people's rights, and that's why it's got in such a muddle and a mess. And I don't think the process has been good. I think it's unlikely the outcome will be good, and that's why you've got Liberal backbenchers like Dave Sharma, like Trent Zimmerman, having to reserve the right to cross the floor, even at this late stage. There's nothing wrong with threatening to cross the floor. It's a good thing, but it shows the deep problems inherent with this legislation. And if this week we end up with legislation that doesn't protect all students and only some of them, that in itself is going to have dangerous ramifications, as both Grace and Brittany so powerfully articulated at the press club today.
David Gazzard, there is a scenario where Labor, and this is Labor's strategy, is obviously try to get their amendments through the House of Reps, more likely in the Senate. When it gets to the Senate, they will allow the passage of, support the passage of the bill to the Senate, amend it again. There is a chance it goes back to the House with those amendments, and then you've got Archer, Zimmerman and Sharma in a position where they would be considering whether or not they support that amended legislation against the government's plans originally. That would be quite something on the eve of an election.
The risk for Labor, of course, is that they've had a demonstrated track record, and don't forget, as the Prime Minister has been saying in debate around this bill, the current situation that allows for the things that Ben is warning about was put in place by the former Labor government. So this goes a long way to trying to reverse some of those areas that damage students at school and don't give them the rights they deserve. But if you have taken this to the last election,
we've got an issue there with David. I think we might still have Ben. Ben, to you for the final word now. That was not intentional, I've got to say, David, and any Liberal Party supporters there that might be thinking we've cut the line. It wasn't intentional. But Ben, if you look to this period now, final sitting, there's not a lot of time. You said it was rushed, but people having to make significant decisions affecting many people's lives, but also with a lot at stake in terms of the electoral contest, given we're only a couple of months out.
That's right. I mean, where's the national ICAC? And the Prime Minister got himself in a bit of a muddle this week, didn't he, by saying, well, the term isn't over, when he was threatened with that question about whether it was a core or non-core promise to deliver an ICAC that was promised 3 years ago. There's really no chance of it passing the Parliament, even if it's introduced at this late stage. And everyone knows the model is deficient, would need a lot of work to get anywhere near good. I think the other thing that's kind of come late in the piece is this acknowledgement or apology that was given yesterday in the wake of what's happened to Brittany Higgins and other women in Parliament. I think that's come a bit late. But I do think those issues relating to women and abuse are going to be much bigger in this election than the last. And while it happened outside of Parliament today, I was down there at the press club for Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins. I think I haven't seen as powerful speeches as those, and their command of the stage. And as you mentioned earlier, Kieran, having quite a transformational impact on our society and on our politics. So I'm very interested to see how our political leaders deal with their specific calls now and through the election cycle period.
Ben Oquist, thank you to you. David Gazzard, appreciate it.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.